Welcome back to Our Hunting Stories. For this one, I get together with my good buddy and coworker Chad Hyman over a lunch hour, which results in a cameo by our general manager Dustin. So we talk about Chad's recurve buck that he harvested here in late November 2022. As always, I'm your host, Derek DeBoer. Enjoy.
Right. He's down.
How's the season?
Good.
How did it shake out?
Good.
It seems like you always have a handful of bucks you got your eyes on.
Yeah.
And I think
Usually a few.
This season was pretty much the same, so you can run down how that all turned out for you. I know some of that was a disappointment maybe, but...
Yeah, so there was one buck in particular that I'd planned on chasing this year, and he ended up getting shot in early October. Didn't really have... There was a couple other bucks that I was definitely going to shoot if I got an opportunity, and none of them ever really materialized. I think one of them we've got trail cameras, pictures of mid-November, and I don't think he was probably going to make it through the season. Seemed to have some injuries that he wasn't going to.
Was that one of them you thought maybe got hit by a car?
Yeah. I think he got hit by a car, and buck I ended up harvesting. I had never seen him before. He just appeared at first light and came in, and the rest is history.
So if my memory is correct, like you and I text throughout the season, and we talk, of course, at work.
Uh-huh.
So I should probably back up and say that we work together.
Yeah.
And we've known each other for quite a while and that sort of thing. But so we talk quite frequently about the deer we see and share pictures and that sort of thing. So one buck got harvested, one probably hit by a vehicle, so he's kind of off the list.
Yeah.
And then there were two other ones I remember you showed pictures of, or actually video, I think, of the other two.
Oh, yeah.
That were
so
possibilities,
one
maybe?
of those bucks, two bucks got locked up in November, early November, on a ranch north of where I hunt. And the one, I believe, the video wasn't great. The one I believe is the one that got hit by the car.
Oh, I got you.
And you could see was busted up. They got trail camera pictures of him for a couple days, and he was hunched up, not looking well at all, and then hasn't been on a camera since.
So out of three possibilities, they all got erased.
The one that got locked up was not in good shape and ended up being euthanized to cut the other one free. But so not a good year for the mature deer on our area.
Yeah. That's tough, but it is good, and it's fun to see that, like, the property you hunt backs up to a couple thousand acres. I'm sure it's broken up, but so you do have the chance of stumbling across something else.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what happened. But yeah, it seems like you always have a handful of deer you got your eyes on, which makes me jealous.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think is cool about your situation is you seem to be pretty good about talking to your neighbors and sharing information and that sort of thing, and that's
as much as we can.
As much as you can. Yeah, I think that's something that maybe is lacking in a lot of people's relationships with neighbors and other hunters. Sometimes you get in a situation where you do want to protect your own information and the property you hunt, but it's really important to know, I think, where those deer end up and what happens to them. So you're not just chasing a ghost and having high hopes for nothing. So
yeah, I'm more of an open book than I probably should be. But I'm not a secretive person at all. If I know a deer's I'm friends with everybody that hunts around me for the most part, and it's nice to know, hey, these deer are in the area, because you might get a picture of a deer and not a great quality picture.
Right.
Can't tell age class on them. I mean, I try to target older age class deer, and then you have your moments where it's fast and furious and you can't tell. At least that way everybody's kind of in the know on how, like, everybody that hunts around there is more focused on age class than antler size.
Yeah,
which is good.
and as far as that goes, so like Darren and I feel like it's our goal to take the oldest deer or the best deer off the property every year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you could be misled just by what you're seeing yourself if you don't share that knowledge and get that knowledge from somebody else. Like you're kind of alluding to, like we could think a 3.5-year-old's the biggest deer we got. Well, kind of by our rule to have fun doing it, he's fair game. But if you come by the information to know, hey, there's a couple older deer around, let's hold off. Then you build that age structure. And I think that's kind of finally what we're seeing, not necessarily from getting information from other people, but with us just focusing on learning that so you're not ruining that for the next years to come. So that's kind of fun. And I can't stand it when, and I fall into this too, you're just holding back information and you're always blaming the other people, the other hunters and stuff, because that's no fun.
No, no. I want everybody to be successful.
Yeah.
I like the one that got harvested this year in early October. I was happy as could be for the guy. Like, I'm not taking away from anything. Like, yeah, it would be cool if I got the opportunity at that deer, but no, I'm over the moon for that guy.
Well, and then you get to the point, let's just say half a dozen people hunt around a property, and you go from one year to the next, and the older deer from the previous year don't show back up. Well, they were harvested or found dead or something like that. They met their end, and somebody knows something about it. So what's the point of being secretive about it? Let's support everybody. But anyway, past that, so the potential 3 deer that you were after off the board, so that gets you to what was around Thanksgiving time, is that right?
Yeah, just after Thanksgiving. And I honestly didn't know the one buck that we believe was hit by a car. I did not know he was.
What's up, gentlemen?
We're in the middle of a podcast, Dustin.
You want to come in and join in?
Serious?
Yeah. Do you want to join in?
Where's the camera?
I don't have a
We don't
camera
have
on
a
it.
camera. It's audio.
Low budget, man. You want to join in?
Oh, okay.
Later.
Later. How long you guys in here?
A couple hours.
Yeah.
Is there a keg around here?
Where were we?
Thanksgiving, you didn't know the deer.
Okay,
hit
so
by
I
the car
didn't
was
know
still
that.
dead.
Yeah, I did not know that deer was injured at the time. I actually found out after I had informed the guy that had shot that big buck that I'd harvest, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't think this one's gonna make it." And I was like, "Oh no, he's probably not gonna make it." He had the old hunchback like gut shot animal has, and it's like he's busted up internally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I had a good wind and climbed up in my stand that's been notoriously good every year. You always want a particular wind for it because it sets at the top of a canyon rim, and the majority of the deer movement's to the west of you. So with the southwest wind, you're good. Stuff to the east that comes by typically uses a trail. It's probably 8 to 10 yards from the base of my tree. So since I'm at the top of a canyon rim, at first light, I'm the first, like the tree that I'm located in is the first thing that catches sunlight. So your thermals are rising first thing in the morning. So you can pretty much, as long as they don't come in that half hour before sunlight or before sunrise, you can pretty much always beat their noses. It's just one of those awesome tree stands that produces year after year. Right at first light, I did a rattling sequence. Thought I heard something in the canyon below me moving through. And then a minute or two later, I looked to the west and a deer came out of the canyon, and he was probably 120 yards west of me. And looked at him through the binoculars, didn't recognize him, but knew immediately he was a deer I wanted to harvest. Snort wheezed at him. He tried cutting down in the canyon rim. I assume he was going to try and loop around me to get on the downwind side. Because a lot of times it seems like when you call to a deer, they want to scent check first and then get visual, or in my experience at least. But when he got to that canyon rim, then I grunted a couple times and he stopped, made a scrape, and snort wheezed at him one more time while he was making the scrape. And then it was just a beeline right to the base of my tree. Ended up shooting him at about 12 yards. So it was second year hunting with a recurve. And it's been quite the uphill battle to get a deer harvested with a recurve. I missed a good one last year at 20 yards. Limbs squeaked as I drew back, and he hadn't hit the opening yet. But
What's your
super
comfortable
stoked.
range with your recurve?
I am comfortable out to 25 yards. Like, I'm pretty well set at that's my effective range. I can make a shot 100% of the time in a perfect setting.
Right, yeah,
like,
exactly.
you never know what your adrenaline's going to do.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's impressive. I didn't realize it's only been 2 years
Yeah.
with the recurve. I knew you.
Yeah. My hunting has progressed. So I started with a rifle. When we came into deer hunting, it was 14 was the legal age to start drawing a tag. Started with a rifle because my dad rifle hunted at the time. Did that for 2 years and then decided to go to muzzleloader, and then decided to go to bow, and then onto the recurve.
So when's the crossbow get?
Crossbow's never going to be a thing. I don't foresee myself ever picking up a crossbow.
That's a kind of a tricky subject with a lot of people.
It really is, but
So 12 yards. How was the shot?
shot was high. I hit him in the spine, but dropped immediately and then put another arrow in him, and that was that.
That's the way to do it.
Well, not really.
Well,
it was an ideal situation.
no, but sometimes those close shots end up going high.
Yeah.
I mean, for whatever other reason.
Yeah. Well, and I shoot instinctively, and it's always pick a spot, but it was one of those, I guess, blackout moments where it's
Yeah.
like, did I pick a hair? No, I'm not sure I picked a hair.
Yeah.
I drew back and was just looking at chest and let go.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. He was a 10-point, correct? Nice, clean.
Correct. 10 point, and he had broken off G2 on his left side.
Big brows, though.
Yeah, really long brow tines. And that was the first thing I noticed on him. I saw he was carrying a nice frame, really nice brow tines. It was like, yep, I'm not looking at him
Right.
again. That's the deer I'm going to try and harvest.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, congrats. Then you did end up, like, I don't have this knowledge, but you age your deer. You look
Yeah.
at their teeth, and
Yep.
what'd you find when you...
So when I aged him, I thought it was 3.5. So immediately I'm like, oof, I might have jumped the gun on
Yeah.
this one. But I did get a second opinion from a biologist, and he said he was 4.5. So that was more of a relief. I tried to shoot for that 5 years and older. But then again, he came into a fight and was bristled up,
Right.
and not having any experience with what deer this was, it was...
That's tough, and I think it's always fair to just go with the excitement level.
Yep.
If they get you ready
That's-
to get the bow,
that's
draw
something,
the bow back.
That's a good point, because there was brother-in-law and I were talking about that at Thanksgiving. It's gotten to be such a game of inches. People really focus on trying to hit certain inch mark, or for their benchmark. And he and I were talking about it, and I had a doe run into me, and the last few years I've been hunting mobile a lot. I just have a lightweight tree stand and some climbing sticks. I'll get into an area that I think is going to be good. I try to hunt edges of bedding cover a lot. You never know what the wind's going to do in Kansas.
Right, yeah.
So I'll go in early, hang a stand, or if I've got time the night before, go in and hang a stand. But I hunt low. I mean, a lot of times I'm 10 foot off the ground. You try to pick a tree that you can still be hidden in.
Yeah.
But most of the time I don't use more than 2 sticks.
And that's interesting to me, because I always feel like we're hunting out of ladder stands, but I always feel like we're too low. And maybe there's a spot where you're in the middle of being low enough and high enough. Maybe we're at that awkward. But we also, I think, somewhat similar terrain that you have. We've got those ravines and canyons and stuff, which can put you on a totally different elevation than if you're just thinking about your tree stand height by itself on level ground. When you start using those elevations of the canyons and the canyon rims and stuff, you can skew your elevation pretty quickly. And the wind, like a lot of times you'll have, if you're just considering the straight direction of the wind, it's good for a stand, but as it comes over the rims of those little canyons or hits trees, it can swirl. So I don't know how we'll overcome that, but it's nice to be mobile, I guess. If you
Very good point. Last year, I mostly during the rut will hunt ridge tops because you have a predictable wind, and if you can get it to where it's blowing away from the canyons that deer are usually frequenting, you can beat their nose. I also hunt off the ground quite a bit. Like the buck I missed last year, I was on the ground at that point. Try to stay mobile. Like if you're not seeing deer, I will still hunt because you can typically during the rut find you can hear rutting activity well before you get into them, or you'll see a little satellite buck.
Yeah,
and they're usually, if you can stay out of their sight, you can usually get in pretty close and call them to you because they're so territorial when they've got a doe locked down. But there was one instance last year where I had a really good wind, like it was blowing, quartering them, and it was a buck, had a doe locked down, but she was just milling around in a hard stand of oaks. But they had good wind, and all I can think is the thermal, when it went over that canyon rim, it was pulling down that draw because they were not in what the wind would tell you was your scent stream, but they sure as heck, they turned their head and looked right at me, and I wasn't moving or anything. Like, yep, that's a learning experience.
I had a wind this year. It was early November, and I really didn't know where I was going to sit based on kind of what we'd seen for activity. But I wanted to check out one stand. It's kind of at the bottom of one of these sharp hills. And we had, I think, a southeast wind, which is different. And we've actually seen kind of an uptick in movement on that wind. And the stand was good, except that when that wind came over top of that hill, it swirled back down, and so it was actually pulling my scent back onto my shooting lanes in the trail. And I had a couple does come in and get right in front of me, and they got me right away. And so I kept checking the wind, and it was just consistently pulling over the top, so I just let them leave and got out of there. That was going to screw things up, because then it also, I imagined, could enter one of those canyons. And so instead of staying southeast, it's rolling back in and then maybe going up into this area, and we completely leave that area alone. It's probably 20 acres, so I doubt if it got it all the way in there, but the mouth of it would have got a healthy dose of my scent. So I was like, yeah, it's not worth screwing this up that early. So
the hardwoods are a hard place to.
Yeah,
I've had south winds come in and be north of deer and had them smell you, and you didn't come in from that direction.
Yep.
They just hit the bottom of the ravine and roll.
Yeah,
and that's the only thing that makes sense to me, is it just rolls as it's going through the trees.
And we have a lot of thick cedars, and so when you're checking your wind, whatever you're using, well, we're using milkweed or something like that now. I used to use a puffer.
Yep. Which doesn't tell you.
It doesn't tell you much.
It tells you what the first 5 feet are.
I'll use my breath too, you know, but they can see that through the sunlight. But using just like the milkweed, you'll drop it, and the cedars will deflect the wind enough that it's not really telling you where that's going. I mean, it's kind of swirling and drifting and dropping and going up and down all kinds of different ways. So unless it's a fairly strong wind, it's kind of hard to predict in that terrain. But talking about score and guys' benchmarks and stuff, I think it's healthy to have something to motivate you, and whether that's a score in inches, you got to beat your last buck, or a certain age class, or whatever the case is. But I always got to remind myself that, like, that's a personal thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other than yourself and your close group of buddies, nobody else really cares about what you kill.
Yeah.
And so, like, keep that in perspective. That's something that I've kind of struggled with. You want to think that everybody cares, but they really don't.
No.
And so, like,
they're shooting for their own thing.
Yeah, and so, like, to that end, just make your goals what's going to make you happy, and and get better as an outdoorsman.
We got sidetracked on that while we were talking about having your own personal goals and that. But one of the most intense moments I had this year, we were talking about hunting low. I had a doe that was getting pushed around by a little buck, and she was running for dear life. I don't know if she had just came in the cycle and was at that panic stage where they don't know what to do and they're just running around aimlessly. But she came in, and she was, I don't know, 8 feet from me and at eye level, because I was down in the ravine there, and it was just, that got me pumped more than anything.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are we shooting for when we have these goals? Like, I would have, that could have made my season, right?
Yeah.
Just being that close to those animals is.
We have a deer, he's an 8-point, and he's got a dislocated or broken front hoof on one side, and it's more than that because his whole leg's all crippled. Really bad limp, and I don't think he's in pain because he was that way last year, so he's survived a whole year. He didn't put on really any antler growth. He looks like he's like a 1.5 old or maybe 2-year-old just by his antler size, but we know he's at least 3 based on last year. And he came in early in the week that I was taking off there in November. I was like, man, I need to shoot this deer. And it would make me happy just based on our experience with him, and you know, it's awesome being out to hunt, and I did get excited about him coming in because it's a deer I recognize, all that kind of stuff. But then you think back, like, I know there's a couple other ones running around out here that I'd really like to see and try for, so it's all. Yeah. But you get burned real fast. Yeah. You don't take a good opportunity, and pretty soon you're sitting there with a tag, but oh well. It's all part of it. Do you process your own? I do. Yeah. I've processed my own for probably 15 years or more. Yeah, we've done a handful of them, but here in the last couple of years, it's just more convenient to take them to a processor. But growing up, we always took them to a processor, but when I moved up here for college, you didn't have that luxury. Yeah. So it's like, well, I'm start processing myself. Yep, save a little money. Yeah. And it's a good experience. It's all part of it. It's fun to do too. Yep. Trying out new recipes and stuff. Do you have any thoughts for next year? Any goals or anything going on? I pretty much take every year as it rolls in. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know how much shed hunting you do or that, but you always pick up intel doing that. Right. Like between that and Onyx, I've learned so much about what the deer are doing and where they're staying. Like, it seems like the property that I've hunted for years, Onyx tells me deer spend a lot of time at a certain elevation because you can follow contour lines of the topography, and all of my sheds have been found in one topographic section, which is one down from where I have my tree stand set, so it's kind of convenient, but it's just interesting. I have not, I do remember you mentioning that before, but I have not thought about that in relation to finding sheds. We're not very successful, to be honest, in finding sheds. Oh, I walked 7 miles before I found my first one last year, and I found 5 in a 100-yard radius. Yeah. I don't know how ours is in relation to other places, but it seems like there's real heavy bedding off of our property, and so I think they're more attracted to that for whatever reason. Now Darren has picked up a couple sets here in the last, in fact, he's found 2 complete sets in the last 2 years, which is unheard of for us. Normally we're finding dinks or nothing special, so that will be exciting. The thing that's disappointing to me this year is we haven't seen maybe that middle age class of deer. We've had a lot of really young ones, and then just actually only 2 that I would say are real mature deer, and Darren shot one of them. So it's kind of interesting to see if there will be some other ones move in. My theory is that Darren's was kind of that bully buck and so aggressive that he kind of held down the fort and kept some of them out of the area, and I'm guessing that maybe some of these other ones will feel more comfortable coming back. There were 2 deer last year, I would say they were 3-year-olds, and they stuck around this year until mid-September. And then I think it got a little congested and they all split off. Darren stayed home and he shot him. So it'll be interesting to see if other ones come back and fill in that spot, or if it's going to be some of these younger ones kind of growing up and sticking around. But that's kind of the fun stuff for us now, trying to put all those pieces together. It's really disappointing when you get a couple years of history with a young deer, and then I don't know if it's just the territorial nature of those guys. They get pushed around and leave the area.
Yeah.
And then so you lose the potential of that deer. But there's always one or two hanging around.
I saw a lot of 3-year-olds this year, and it was that normal time when you see them, the first part of November, where it's the first year that they're mature enough that they're actually probably going to get some breeding, and so they're really covering the ground.
Right.
So you never know if they're going to stick around or if they came from 4 sections away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you never know how much they travel either.
Yeah.
That's something that would be interesting to find out, and you get bits and pieces of that if you talk to people around. Sometimes you'll hear that information. But
when I was muzzleloader hunting, I did a lot of summer scouting, and there was a non-typical that we watched one summer, and when rut rolled around, we found, I mean, he was very distinct. You don't mistake him with another deer. We saw him 5 miles from where he was all summer.
Yeah.
Like, how much ground are they covering?
That's crazy.
So it makes it hard for you to say, this is the deer I'm going to hunt.
Right. Yep.
Unless you've got a homebody.
I haven't figured any of that out, other than like the ones that we were seeing in the summer. It's kind of easy to maybe identify their summer range because you'll see them regularly on a camera. And then the other thing I noticed about those, and also the one that I was trying to get after this fall, and probably including Darren's, it wouldn't matter what wind was going on. You'd catch them somewhere in that vicinity. So they were very comfortable and knew how to move around the farm regardless of conditions.
Yeah.
And that made me feel like, well, they're probably not waiting for a certain wind to come through and check things out. They're already there. They're just kind of shifting their pattern.
So you have noticed a shift in pattern with different wind.
Well,
I haven't broken it down that much.
Not consistent. But what I found out was, well, basically no. Because I started charting every wind and every occurrence on our cameras and when we'd see the deer, and there was just no pattern. So I was like, well, that deer has to be living here and not carrying.
Yeah.
Now it wouldn't be consistent. There wasn't a real movement from one wind to another, so I didn't see that shift in pattern. But he wasn't waiting on a northwest wind to come through the farm. He was there regardless. So I'm like, well, he's probably hanging around there. He'd just kind of drift through there. And so I thought, well, he's probably a homebody. Now, those other that we saw during the summer with the same kind of habit, it didn't matter what temperature or wind or any of that. I didn't plot pressure, but they were there all the time. And then I think they just moved out because of, changing their fall patterns. And a lot changes when the crops get out of the field. So
yeah, and we don't be real picky on the days we hunt either, do we?
No, unfortunately not. This year was the best it's been since we have seriously wanted to hunt the rut. And I'm changing. I might change my opinion completely. Sorry, Darren. I may bail on this rut week.
Yeah.
Because I have a hard time getting on these deer that are chasing a doe and coming in fast and hot and unpredictable. I would love to find one on a field edge in October to be able to pattern them, but we really don't have the crops to do that. Yeah. But man, it's tough. It is tough hunting the rut for sure.
I've progressed. I used to always want to hunt because the rut's finally here. Halloween to the first week in November. Now I actually prefer the Thanksgiving time frame because it seems like a lot of the does are bred, and that's when I'm seeing more movement by mature deer that are out looking for those last few does. Because it seems like most of the does come in a set window. You don't have the trickle, so you get that late November, and it seems like they're moving a lot more, and it's mostly midday movement too.
Yeah, I saw more daytime, midday movement after, I would say, like the 18th, kind of the middle part of of November. My problem is we've had really good experiences basically every date through November. So when I think back of past experience, I'm like, I don't even know when. One of the things that bothers me, I would agree with you. Hunting in and around that week of Thanksgiving has been great for us, for me in the past as far as encounters and stuff. But we right now are taking our time off and hunting that first full week of November, which is also good. But if you don't have luck getting on your deer, for us, so there's 2 guys hunting every day for a week or 10 days straight, not so much the bucks, but the does get used to you a little bit. And if they get sharp to you, then you're screwed. So then by the time that Thanksgiving week rolls around, all your does are hiding out and anxious if they've come wise to you. Yeah. And so they're changing up what they're doing. Also, they've been harassed by bucks so much, they're not coming out in fields anymore. So it gets a little tougher, but I do agree that you see a uptick in movement at that time. But I don't know, it's all great from mid-October.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've shot deer on Halloween. I've shot 3rd through the 7th. I've shot 21st on.
Yeah.
It's
a
a great month.
The other thing that this year I'm trying to keep track of beyond when we're seeing certain bucks is when the does seem to be receptive. Because I've also heard that the does will come in to heat around the same, plus or minus a day every year. So maybe if I can hunt that specific doe or that area that doe was coming into heat, maybe that'll overlap with the buck I'm trying to hunt too. So I don't know if I put all this in an Excel sheet. If I can even remember to look at that next year, I'll maybe have something going on, but I don't know. It's all interesting. It'll drive you crazy because this year
certainly can.
I think I know I was within 100 yards of the deer I was after 3 times that week that I was off. He was doing his thing, and that week he was sticking to nighttime hours. He was not visible during the daytime. It was crazy, but it's the way they go.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot for sticking ourselves in a tree stand,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I was nervous about that. I get anxious checking trail cameras. I get anxious doing anything.
You don't want to be putting scent down.
Oh man, I hate it. I hate it when I blow a deer walking to the stand, but it's very difficult to get into our property without bumping a deer of some sort. So you just run that risk. I hate that, but I was looking at our farm and I kind of quickly measured out using Onyx, like the acres that we affect by walking in and hunting versus the acres that we don't hunt at all from mid-October until January 1. And over half of it, so like 170 acres, don't even get touched by us during hunting season, which probably limits our experience with those deer. We just hate running the risk of bumping them and pushing them. We'd rather give them that. And I don't know, I watch too much YouTube stuff and listen to too many podcasts. But, they're always saying like hunt the fringes, until you have a reason. Like I don't know where this buck is bedded, so I don't have any reason to go into that area. But I feel like, maybe we're pushing too far in, but I don't, I guess if you're giving them that much space, maybe we're okay. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
I think I'm overthinking it, to be honest.
There's times I have weekends to hunt.
Yeah.
Like I don't do the deer week thing.
Yeah.
It sounds like it'd be pretty nice at times.
Next year you need to do it.
Yeah, I need to do deer week. But there's times kamikaze through a property.
Well, and
I will walk until I find something. Just put the wind in your face and go. But I probably mess up the hunting some or pressure. That might be too much pressure, but they've got till next week to calm down. And during the rut, it doesn't seem like they're as wound up.
Yeah, I don't know though. Certainly, you don't want to
don't push them all off.
Yeah, don't push them all off and do all that crazy stuff. But when we started hunting, we didn't know what we were doing. We still don't know what we're doing. But we would drive 4-wheelers through the property, and we would bump these deer. We weren't running trail cameras, so that was the only time we'd see what bucks were on our property. And so you'd see them and you'd bump them. We didn't know we were messing things up. But then you'd go in and hunt, like a couple days later, and you'd see that buck doing its normal things.
Yeah.
So
if they don't smell you, I don't think they.
Or if they don't.
Threatened by it.
Yeah, or if they don't think that they're going to get shot by you if they do smell you. You know, I mean, we'd walk everywhere. And same with turkeys. I remember as kids, you'd just walk around and find flocks of turkeys, and you just walk around them, and they'd bump a little ways here and there, certainly without spooking off. But
it helps when they're seeing farm activity too, on a regular basis, or smelling people doing chores and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
that's what you need to do. Just do
do more chores down there.
Do more chores down there.
Run my chainsaw.
Yeah.
Well, so then again, overthinking. So like my pickup rattles a little bit, and I thought these deer can probably hear me driving. I never drive.
Which truck you
I
got.
never drive to the farm at 5 o'clock in the morning, except for during hunting season. They can probably hear me rattling down the road, park. I'm pretty quiet about closing doors and stuff, but they're like, "Well, he's here again. We're gonna leave." You know, I don't know. It could be, but
need to get new shocks.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. And we need to work on how we approach our tree stands probably a little bit. You know, we used to have the four-wheeler, and so it'd be like a beaten path everywhere you'd go. You could walk quietly. Now we don't have an ATV, and so a lot of those trails have been kind of closed off or overgrown, and so you're crunching through the leaves and stuff. And I don't know, a little preparation, but who has time for all that stuff?
Yeah, it definitely helps having your line. Well, when I do the mobile thing, it's not as convenient, but my stand that I hunt every year, I've got it pretty well cleaned up getting to it. So I'm not leaving any ground scent as far as rubbing on brush or grass. It's pick a cattle trail. Cattle keep it pretty grazed down in that area. But I've cut all of the wild rose and brush honeysuckle and that kind of stuff out of the way.
Yeah, well, I'd say we do a medium job. One thing that I did this year, well, we hunted a field that we haven't hunted for a long time, and it's the spot Darren shot his deer from, and we planted like a 1 acre food plot up there, and it's doing okay. But rather than following the field edge all the way around to my stand, I got to the edge or the corner of that food plot, and I just took a straight diagonal through the middle. That way I'm not leaving my scent ring all the way around that field edge, because I don't know. Exactly. There's scrapes all along there, and I don't know where the deer will come out, and I don't want to leave a band. At least by the time they get to the middle of the field where I walked, I would have had a shot at them.
Don't want to cross every trail they've got coming into the field.
And what I found out later on, the deer actually would follow almost that exact same path across the middle of the field. There's deer tracks right in my tracks, so I don't know. They didn't seem to mind that, but I don't know. It's all a big game and a lot of fun. So
it is.
I'm glad
It's a chess match.
Glad you tagged out this year. So
I am too.
So well,
thanks. Still got time to get yours.
I'm gonna hunt in a blizzard. It sounds like we got negative temperatures and winds coming up this weekend. But next week it'll settle down. So maybe it'll congregate all the deer, and I'll be able to see one. The one I'm after, I'm worried we haven't had pictures of him since rifle season. So I'm not real motivated to go in until we get pictures of him. And then if we do, I'll try to come up with a strategy. But I don't know. It'll all depend on that. I really don't want to go mess around. I guess that brokefoot deer, I could go in after him. He'd be a good one to take at this point. But yeah, it's all fun, and kind of already starting to think about next year's, bittersweet as that is.
For sure.
I hate waiting all year long to get back to that point.
That's why we work.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's hard to keep your focus off of hunting long enough to be productive, I guess.
It's only for a few months out of the year.
But, I took a bad shot on my deer, and it hurt, and I'm still bummed about it. And I was like, in any other sport or anything else you do, you can go back home and work on it. You can practice and practice. Like, it's really hard. You can practice your shot, you can do all that stuff, but to actually get another opportunity, you got to wait a whole year. Pretty much. So,
and hope that it comes the next year.
Well, and at this point, in this scenario, I don't care. Like, that would be super cool if that deer does show up again next year.
For sure.
But I'm going to hunt just the same next year, but just to get to that opportunity again is going to be a long wait. But.
Well, it's a relief. Like, you had that buck and you got pictures of him.
Yeah, best case scenario, we find
later.
his sheds maybe. So
It's
he's very much alive. We've had more pictures of that deer since I've shot him than
I did the
before,
same
so.
thing. I hit a buck in the shoulder, and I don't know if I hit the T of his blade or what, but it stopped the arrow on him here. It's probably been 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I was just heartbroken. Like, how did
Yeah.
I do this? It was
Yeah.
I snuck in on him, and he was probably 20 yards from me. And rainy day, I was actually going in to hang a tree stand and release the arrow. I'm like, dead deer. And went over there, and about 10 yards from impact, I found my broken off arrow, and there was only 9 inches of the arrow missing.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is not looking good. And I saw him late November chasing, like, oh, he's good. And then I got trail camera pictures of him the next year, but he was old. And then I never heard of him being harvested or anything. But it's nice to know that they're still okay. It's the not recovering one, and it's died somewhere that would bother you.
Yeah, I don't know if it was that particular story you were referencing, but I remember texting you. I sent you the video of mine and all that stuff, and we were texting back and forth, and you were real encouraging. You said, "Yeah, I did that once. He died of old age." I was like, "Well, that's not what I want to hear."
He did die of old age.
Also somewhat comforting that the deer will survive. And I pretty much knew right away because it was a bad decision, bad shot, the whole thing, and I'll maybe come to cover that later on in more depth, but. Oh well, it's all part of it, and everybody does it at some point, I suppose.
Oh, 100%.
But
we're hunting with a stick and string. It's going to happen someday.
Yeah. So, well, thanks, Chad. I guess we better go back to
Absolutely.
work. And
we probably
do something.
better. Thanks, Derek.
Thanks.